Today is May the 27th, 2022. My name is Karen Neurohr. I'm a librarian at Oklahoma State University Library, and I'm in the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. I'm at the Eastern Shawnee Tribe of Oklahoma headquarters, and it is my honor to be with Chief Glenna Wallace today, and she is participating in our interview project related to COVID. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm really honored to be able to interview you for this project.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the work that you do. You said that you were first elected chief in 2006.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And as you indicated, this is 2022, so things have changed quite a bit from 2006. There are 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes in the state of Oklahoma, and in fact, those are the only 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes in the United States, and so we are one of those 3. We're located right on the Oklahoma-Missouri line, so oftentimes we're referred to as we've written grants because our address for years was Seneca, Missouri, because we didn't have 911 addresses, and we became a federally recognized tribe in 1939 is when we adopted our first constitution and then our charter and had our elections for our first chief. And so our first chief was a gentleman by the name of Walter Bluejacket. And since 1939 through now, 2022, we've had 11 chiefs. I am the first female to have ever been elected to any one of the 3 federally recognized tribes. So that was new, and not only was I the first chief here, Ottawa County is unique in that there are 9 federally recognized tribes in this one small county with only a population of 30,000 people. 7 of us were forcibly removed from the Ohio Valley immediately after the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. So we, along with what is now the Seneca-Cayuga tribe, which is located between here and Grove, Oklahoma, so probably 20 miles from here, we were on a reservation together in Ohio, and we were called the Mixed Band there. We lived on the same reservation. They were at one end of the reservation, we were at the other. And when the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830, we were the first to be forcibly removed. So we led the removal march. Several other tribes came behind us. As I say, we were in 1832. I think the Wyandottes were the last ones to be removed, and they were, I believe, in 1845. We were also the only ones that when we removed, we came directly to Indian Territory. All of the others, the remaining 5 of those 7 tribes, they went to Kansas first and were there several years, and then were removed here after the Civil War. So of the 9 tribes, we meet together once a month in Miami, Oklahoma at we call it the Intertribal Council, which is shortened to ITC. And at that time, I was the only female at ITC, so 8 men and one female. Later, Chief Cook was elected sometime later with the Ottawa tribe. So now we have 2 females who represent the tribes there.
So what was that like being the first female and the only female with the council?
It wasn't so different for me because I had retired from a college position where I was oftentimes the only female. I was the first female to be elected as a division chair at the college, so I was rather accustomed to meeting with men primarily and with few women in attendance. It was a little awkward and sometimes inconvenient when we were going to conference or so forth. The guys had done things together so long, they automatically had their traveling partners and this and that, and so I would have to contact somebody else and say, would you mind if I rode along with you? It seems to be a little unnecessary for 9 tribes to be each of us driving separately from here to Oklahoma City for a meeting or even to Tulsa, that it makes more sense to be able to visit with each other and share our happenings and our concerns and our possibilities. And so I always had to be the one to initiate that call because they just didn't think about calling a female, but it's not been an issue since then. In the first election, it was an issue. I actually had people who wrote, we do a absentee ballot, and I actually had people write and say they didn't know that they could vote for a female, that a female just wasn't supposed to be a chief or something like that, but that hasn't been an issue since that time.
Mm-hmm. Good, that's interesting. So, when you first started hearing about COVID, what were your thoughts?
Well, when I first started hearing about COVID, obviously I was a chief, and so I deal primarily with the administration side. We do have casinos, but I'm not a casino person. That's not my background, and why should I try to tell somebody who's had 35 years experience in casinos how to run a casino? So I deal primarily with the administration, and we have approximately at that time about 200 employees. We've downsized a little bit since then, but I was looking at it from an administrative point of view, knowing that it was dangerous, knowing that we didn't know what was going to happen, coming to work every day, never knowing how many people were going to be calling in, how many people needed to be tested, how many vacancies we were going to have, what shuffling we needed to do, determining when we were going to require masks or when we required offices to be closed, making decisions of when we had to furlough people, looking at budgets and deciding could we afford to continue to pay them while they were gone, or were they going to have to file for unemployment, knowing that that's affecting the entire state and there's probably going to be a time issue there. So my first concerns were obviously for the employees. I wanted them to be safe, and so there were concerns about how do we do that? How do we, what do we do when a person says that they need to be tested? How do we do contact tracing? Do we require this when we live in a society anymore where there are such differences of opinions and sometimes such vocally stressed difference of opinions that how do we stay together as a team? How do we stay together and be safe but continue to take care of our people? I think of ourselves as a service organization, a tribe, but a service tribe. And so we have approximately 3,750 tribal citizens, but more than 2/3 of those live elsewhere. So how do we, and we have a strong benefits program. So how do we keep our programs operating so that we can service our tribal members and yet not contaminate each other here? How do we decide who's going to be able to work remote, and how do we decide that there are some situations where we just simply can't work remote, that people have to be here? How do we pay those people? Do they retain the same salary, or do we reward people for staying here and being in contact with people? Or it was just decision after decision after decision, and not knowing an end date and not knowing how severe it was going to be. And actually, it turned out that it was less severe for us. We lost fewer people than many of the tribes, so we're very thankful. But needless to say, it was a challenging time.
Mm-hmm. Who did you go to or rely on for information in the early part of the pandemic?
Certainly Zoom improved during that time, and certainly other sources so we were always having webinars. Fortunately, OSU was giving information, OU was giving information, the United States, the health departments, the Indian Health Service giving lots of information. So it really was a matter of having enough time to keep up with the different sources and knowing that there was a difference sometimes in the information we received from those sources. So how did we proceed?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, did you have to close down the businesses?
We did.
Mm-hmm.
We chose to close both of our casinos, and we kept a skeleton crew because you still have buildings; they still have to be operated, and so we had to maintain some security. We had to maintain some housekeeping aspects. We had to maintain telephone contact. So, but we furloughed, and that was a very difficult decision of which ones to furlough and which ones not to furlough, and try to be considerate and always keep the employee at the forefront and understand. But those were difficult decisions. Fortunately, we have employees who were most understanding and who cooperated beautifully. And our casinos, I think, were closed almost 3 months. That certainly had a financial impact upon us. We're a small tribe. We've never been known for being rich. We pride ourselves on watching our businesses and trying to be strategic and make good decisions. But this was just so unknown. We didn't know what we were. We're fortunate that we've been a frugal tribe, that we've always been concerned about being able to help our tribal citizens and keep our budgets intact. And we had a reserve, but we used up every bit of that reserve, and we wondered if we would what the recovery was going to be.
Mm-hmm. What do you think in your personal background helped you with all of these decisions and to be able to get through that? That would probably derail some people, but you had your education and experience. You were an experienced chief of the tribe. Were those things, did they help you deal with all of these decisions and what you were doing?
All of those things helped me. I've been extremely, I call it fortunate. Some people wouldn't call it fortunate. I've had cancer now 4 times, and had a severe case of skin cancer during this COVID time, and right after I had COVID. And so I've gone through chemotherapy and gone through those times of questioning and wondering, am I going to come through this, and realizing that I could and that I didn't need to take a fatalistic outlook. I kept a positive outlook. I have tremendous faith in the United States. Certainly, there are times that I think I just can't listen to another news broadcast. I just can't hear this negativity. And so trying to be realistic, trying to keep people safe, but believing we are going to make this. We are going to get through this. Believing that the United States has frailties, but the United States has strengths as well. And so Indian tribes did well of coming together, of saying all of us are going to close down because all of us depend upon everybody surviving and everybody being as safe as can be. So it wasn't like we were making the only decision. And the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association definitely stepped up during this time, and we had meetings all the time where we could talk about how are you handling this? What have you experienced? And so yes, my education, my illness, my being able to come through those serious situations, I like to think that I have a positive outlook. I like to think that I have we can do this approach, and not blind myself to the situations, but not be overwhelmed by them either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. So, so the casinos shut down for 3 months. Were there other business enterprises that were affected? that you all have?
We don't have that many enterprises. We have 4 banks. And so banks, obviously, they eliminated the lobbies and it became strictly drive-through. I wouldn't call it a business. It's a service when I talk about our Title VI or AOA program where we serve 100 to 200 elders per day. We had to close the dining rooms on that, but we continued to have drive-through service, pickup service, and we continued to provide the delivery service that we have. We have a convenience store. We obviously did such things as masks are required to come inside. We certainly we closed inside service. We opened our drive-through windows and served people that way. We restricted, cut back on our hours, but we didn't close entirely. No.
Mm-hmm. What does the AOA, what does that stand for?
That's our area on agency.
Okay.
Agency on Aging, AOA,
Okay.
Title VI, and so that's our senior citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were you able to apply for any COVID relief funding that would help?
We were, and we still have several of those programs continuing today. We received one grant where we were able to initiate more of our. We have hoop houses, and so we have the aquaponics. So we were able to finish a building where we could do work with that and provide food for our people. We were able to we had one grant that we were able to actually create our own cleansing items so that it wasn't so expensive, so that we could continue. It was amazing what the PPE program costs were during that time, and so the spraying and cleaning every single inch, every single day. We were able to have there. We were able to have funds to help with. Even today, we have for tribal members who had COVID, who either actually had it or were financially impacted by it. Mm-hmm. Some of them did not have it, but they worked for businesses that they closed and they didn't receive money, or their hours were cut and they didn't receive the same income that they had previously. And so perhaps they fell behind in rent, so we have rental assistance for any COVID-related expenses. We also have homeowner, the same thing. The homeowner assistance for those who are making their home payments, and again, they may have lost their job, or they may have been impacted by needing additional cleaning supplies or needing additional medicine. We have programs where what they call that long haul COVID, where they are still affected and they need assistance and they need help and they need medicine and they need treatment. They need doctors, and so we're able to provide assistance there. So we have help where we can help them with their utilities if they got behind, and those are COVID related. We have help for so many of the schools either closed down or went to remote learning, and so the households were affected by needing computers or needing assistance there, and so we can do internet assistance when they can document, and all of these require documentations. But yes, we were able to have many programs that assisted, and they truly have been a help. Mm-hmm.
Were there you talked about masking and the PPE grants. Was there were there efforts for people to make masks at the beginning? You know, people were sewing masks, and
in the beginning, we had a tribal member who made lots of masks and donated them to many places, and we also had over in our print shop in our library, they also made masks as well. Mm-hmm. So yes, we had that. we went through like everybody else, what's the best mask or what's the safest mask. Sometimes and again, the health department donated many things. Unfortunately, the ones that were donated so much were considered to be the ones that were the least effective, so we still have some of those that are stockpiled. But yes, and again, we had difficulty of some people did not want to wear masks, and we did require wearing masks. We did not require that they be vaccinated. We encouraged, we gave incentives, but we did not require. Again, we wanted to be supportive and as unifying as possible rather than divisive. And as we all know, some of those things became extremely divisive in many different ways.
Were you able to offer financial incentives for vaccination?
We did not go that far. We gave them time off from work to go and get vaccinations. We even offered to take them. We even offered to have them come here on site to make it as pain-free and to make it as easy as possible, convenient for them to do that. But we did not. I'm aware that some people did, but we did not.
So was it the county health department that was coming and doing the vaccinations on site?
Actually, we are co-owners of a bearskin clinic, which is here at Wyandotte, Oklahoma. And so it's the Wyandotte tribe and the Eastern Shawnee tribe. So they are an IHS facility. And so it was through there that they set up the vaccination. Of course, we had people being right here. We're in the 4-state corner, so within 30 minutes, I can be in Arkansas, or I can be in Missouri, or I can be in Kansas, or I can be in Oklahoma. And so that's true of our employees as well. So we gave them time off to go to their county health association. So we had people who were getting their vaccinations in Kansas, and people who were, Joplin is close to us. We had many who were getting vaccinations from the 2 major hospitals there, and so several places. But bearskin would be our predominant one.
So it sounds like there weren't really any challenges or barriers for people if they wanted to get vaccinated.
No.
To be able to do so.
There really were not. No.
And then as time went on and we learned more about COVID and how it spread, then we started hearing about the possibility of the vaccinations. So what were your thoughts and feelings when that news started coming out?
You know, that I would be affected by my childhood on that subject. My father was a miner in the lead and zinc mines, and it was not a healthy place to work, wasn't a clean place to work. And so my father took his miner's settlement when I was about 9 years old, and with that settlement, he bought an old farm truck, a flatbed truck, and we put those trusses up on them and threw a tarpaulin over the top, and it became an RV back in the 1940s. And we left and drove to, we became migrant workers. We went to Oregon, California, and we picked crop after crop, item after item, cut lettuce. We lived in all kinds of unsanitary places. We lived in the back of that truck, and there were 11 of us. There were 5 of us as children, and then my mom and dad, that made 7. And then my mother's brother went with us with his wife and 2 children. So that's 11 of us, and we lived in the back of that truck. We said we didn't leave a litter trail, but we left eggshell trails that we stopped and fixed breakfast, and it was crack the eggs and scramble the eggs for breakfast, so forth. Consequently, that meant we lived in abandoned barns, we slept on hay bales, we lived in migrant tenant houses that a big farm had for their help or so forth. But it also meant we had to change schools often. And that meant we couldn't keep our health records up. And so almost every new school we went to, it was we have to get vaccinations all over again. So vaccinations was something that I had just been so accustomed to it never ever entered my mind, oh, they haven't spent enough time developing this vaccination, or oh, this isn't as secure as what they're saying. I never questioned it. It's a vaccination. I just assumed it's going to help, and so I didn't have any reservations whatsoever. I always encouraged others, but again, we did not require it. But no, I welcomed the vaccinations, and I had COVID. I had a severe case of COVID, almost died from COVID, and just believe had it not been for the vaccinations, I probably would have, because I'm 83 years of age. So I'm definitely in that. I've had cancer several times. I have diabetes. So I'm definitely in that group that they call the compromised group. And I truly believe that had I not had those vaccinations, I would not have made it. And I got my booster the minute that I could. Mm-hmm. And I'm marking the days until I get my next booster, So I am a believer in vaccinations. Mm-hmm. So.
You mentioned the ways that you were able to shift the services to serve the senior citizens, mm-hmm. the elders of the community. Were there other services that had to shift? Different services that you offer? Do you have any child care?
We have a large child care facility, an early childhood learning center. That was always a challenge. We, fortunately, our early childhood learning center is only 6 years of age, so the building was relatively new. And fortunately, each had a separate entrance into each classroom. So we could separate, there's an entrance in the front and there's an exit in the back. And so we could keep our playground times separate. We could keep and we also, when we built it, we didn't have enough money to build a separate cafeteria. So we were actually already in the habit of putting the food on a cart and taking it directly into the room. So we were able to continue with that. Now, we did have some children who were exposed, and we had some who tested positive, and we would have to close that particular classroom, but we wouldn't have to close the entire school. There were a few times that we did close the entire school when the percentages were higher than what we wanted. That was always a challenge because there are parents who truly need childcare, and it affects so many different jobs and so many different people. But yes, we were affected, but yes, we came through it, I think, quite well. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
The responses to the pandemic were in some ways multi-layered, because you would have had your response with your people, the leader of your people, and then this area, this community response, and then we had state and federal response. Were there any particular challenges or benefits to all of those different areas that you were having to deal with?
You're from Oklahoma, and you know that Oklahoma is a conservative state. Yes. And yes, I do. So, yes, and we were always comparing the statistics, because we're in this 4-state area. Mm-hmm. What are the statistics in Oklahoma? What are the statistics in Missouri? What are the statistics in Arkansas? What are the statistics in Kansas? And we were always particularly concerned with the couple of counties, in that area. So rather than looking at one county, we were looking at about 8 different counties all the time. Mm-hmm. And the states took different approaches, so it was interesting to follow that. I just hope we never have to go through this again. All of us now have worked so long, we are just fatigued. and it's a mental fatigue as much as it's physical fatigue as well, but it's a mental fatigue as well. And in addition to that, we are Native Americans, and Native Americans, we tend to be a social group. We have our dances, we have our events, we have our culture that brings us together, and we were not able to do that for 2 years. We weren't able to have our ceremonials. It became even so divisive in the United States that there were some churches who chose to close, and then there were some churches who feel they were forced to close. So it even affected the cultural aspects, our religious beliefs. And we had lots of change, lots of challenge. Again, I'm just so thankful. I know now we wonder where the U.S. assisted too much and what that financial impact is. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather assist too much than assist too little. The assist too little meant losing people. The assist too little meant people dying. The assist too little meant people contaminating other people. And so, yes, I think we have some problems coming out of that, but I'd rather deal with these than deal with what those problems would have been. So we had our first, we don't have ceremonies ourselves, this tribe, because back before 1900, we got down to only 69 people. So we lost most of our ceremonies, but we are invited to the ceremonies of our sister tribes. And so the Shawnee tribe, which is located in Miami, but has its ceremonial ground at Wyandotte, which is just outside Wyandotte, they had their first ceremonial 2 weeks ago. They had missed everything for the last 2 years. It was a time of rejoicing. It was a time of hugging. It was also a time of lots of tears because we looked around and realized there were many who had been there 2 years ago who weren't there. And then we realized that some people aged more than 2 years in that 2 years. And that was sad to see.
That would be hard.
It was very hard.
Yeah.
Very, very emotional, very uplifting in one moment, and then sadness in the next moment. Yes.
Yeah, that would be tough because when you're talking about your cultural traditions and your ways of coming together and being together and not having anything that could replace that.
Nothing.
For 2 years. Or
total vacuum.
Yeah. Was there were there newsletters that you were putting out or anything to try to help people stay connected? I know nothing could take the place of the ceremonial traditions, but were there any other things at all?
Not that I'm aware of. Some other tribes may have. I mean, we do a monthly newsletter anyway, so obviously we kept the news going during that time, but right. But I also grew tired of writing about COVID.
Okay. The next area I was planning to move into, we've already touched on this a little bit, are COVID's effects on you personally, and you said that you did have your own personal battle with it. What about, between you and your family get-togethers, that kind of thing? How did COVID affect you in that way?
We try to get together every Sunday evening for Sunday family dinner. We were able to continue with much of that, but also most of my family did have COVID. Most of them did not have a serious case. I probably had the worst case of all, and mine was late. Well, mine was last August, so I had gone and I was sick at home, very sick at home for 1 week. Finally went to the hospital, was in the hospital, and it was not a good experience. And it wasn't that the hospital neglected or anything else. It's that they were completely filled. Their nurses were. I was so weak, and yet I knew that the only way I was going to gain strength was I needed to get up and walk, but I could not do it by myself. And they simply did not have enough employees to have one person to one person, and we were all in isolation, so you couldn't have your family members come in to help you or anything else. And so I had to leave there knowing that I truly felt that if I continued to stay there, I was not going to make it. I needed somebody to help me get up and to get me a walker, and even though I was able to walk for only 5 minutes at a time, I could walk that 5 minutes and then sit down, and I had difficulty keeping my oxygen level up, and so I could rest 15 minutes and then get up again and walk 5 minutes again, and then rest again 15, and then get up and walk 5 again. And gradually my strength increased, whereas it was just either decreasing or staying flat, in the hospital. So I admire those people who work there, and if you didn't happen to be there and see what they were having to do, the statistics aren't good that we hear today of how many doctors are leaving and how many nurses are leaving, and I can certainly understand that. I can certainly understand that. It was and I'm a person that I think I worked at the college where I worked at for 38.5 years, and I probably had fewer than 10 days absence in the entire time. So I'm not a person to miss, and to be home ill for even through all of my cancer and chemo, I didn't have to miss. I managed all of that quite well, and so I'm extremely fortunate. But COVID was just different. It was just different, and even to this day, I still feel difficulties in my legs. I just don't have my knees particularly. When I first get up, it's like I've got to stabilize myself here so I can take off and walk and so forth. So that's that long haul that we talk about. Yes,
I hope that improves.
So do I. I'm sure it will. But yes.
Okay. You mentioned your positive attitude and outlook and strength with different challenges that might affect people that were less strong differently. Were there any particular ways that you could cope with the stress that were helpful for you?
Well, I think first, just naturally being that way is better than being negative. Believing that, knowing that we all have problems and knowing that we all have challenges, but just believing that we certainly have influence over those challenges and the outcomes of those challenges. My faith in people, my belief that this is only one day and the next day is a brand new day, so we'll start fresh again. Not having a high death rate here encouraged. We had many absences, but we had, as far as our tribe. I'm not aware I'm aware of very few deaths that occurred in our tribe. And that's not true with, for example, when I said Wyandotte, the Shawnee tribe and the absentee Shawnee tribe, both of them had many, many deaths, and they lost their elders that possess this cultural knowledge, I think the many webinars that were on, we did have access to information. All of those were helpful. Yes.
What do you attribute that difference in the deaths to?
I don't know. Perhaps because we're a rural area and we're not as close together all the time. Our towns are small. I think many of us stopped going to the bigger towns and shopping. And again, in my case and in many cases, but not all cases, wearing the mask, trying to do what we could. That was helpful. Mm-hmm.
At what point, so we had the vaccinations that came out, then we had the first booster that came out. At what point did you feel like it was safe to resume how things had been before and what was different about that? Because maybe some things were still different than they were before the pandemic.
Most of us adopted emergency plans, and most of us had levels in there, so we would watch the percentages and of the disease around us, and we would go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 and then back, start descending down.
Mm-hmm.
Even those were always controversial decisions. But I think when we finally decided that we would not require masks, that was a relief to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that they helped, but we were also very tired of them.
Yes.
Very tired of them.
It feels strange to put one on now.
Yes.
It became normalized where it felt strange not to have one on.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's changed too. Did anything change with you about how you think about family, friends, community, the tribe because of this?
Oh, yes. I think for many of us, we don't take things so for granted as we did before. We realize what blessings we have that we just took for granted before. When I think of freedoms, I never thought of freedom of walking into another room or walking into another person's office. It was always, we didn't require them to, if they had separate offices while they were in their office, if they kept their doors shut, so forth, they didn't have to wear a mask, but have a mask there in case if they left their office, they had to be out in the hall, they had to have their masks on. But now we're getting used to not having to knock on somebody's door and do you have your mask on or do you not have your mask on? And it makes us appreciate each other more. We also know how some really sacrificed during this time to help. Mm-hmm. We also are aware how many of them had struggles and what they went through during this time. It was just a horrible time.
Were people sharing that with you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was a time, there was enough isolation. You didn't want any more isolation. Mm-hmm. So I think we used our phones more. I think we used our emails more. I think but we missed that personal contact. Mm-hmm. And I think we lose a lot when we miss that personal contact. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think we're a little bit fearful now as those rates seem to be going up a little bit. How much more are they going to go up, or are they going to be contained, or are we going to be back in this? But thank goodness for the respite that we've had.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that we haven't covered related to this that you would like to share?
I don't want to get into politics. I am so thankful to both presidents that President Trump, I think, truly did speed up getting the vaccinations. I think President Biden has been excellent about getting those vaccinations out to people and making programs available. And I just see both of those. It could have been so much worse than it is. So I'm thankful we live in the United States. We're talking at a time when right now we're all sad because of the shootings that have happened and the death of children, and we realize that there's controversy over so many things, but we actually have more in common than we do in differences, and we need to stop and reflect on that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thankful I live in the United States. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, this covers everything that I was hoping that we could cover, and I just really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
And your honesty and sharing about your experiences for this project. So thank you very much.
I don't want to have to go through it again.
I hope we don't have to.
It was challenging. I'm sure it was challenging for you.
Oh, yes. Yes. Our family are in Tulsa, our children and grandchildren. And so we went for a long period of time where we didn't see them, and that's always hard. So
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We had our family gatherings, but oftentimes one family wouldn't be there because they were having COVID at that time, or so-and-so wasn't there because they had been exposed, or even though we have an early childhood learning center, if they've been exposed, you can't take them there, and so people had to miss work to stay home
mm-hmm.
to take. It was just challenging for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you? Was there contact tracing going on?
We did have contact tracing, and the casino, because they have so many employees, they hired an outside firm. They hired Bluestone that did tracing and kept contact with everyone, and that I don't think the casino manager indicates they just could not have managed without it. They can't imagine how they managed. Mm-hmm. And I think they still have them now, mm-hmm. as to follow up on people and what are the long-term effects, so forth. We learned a great deal about things that we didn't even know about our own employees. We didn't realize this is an extremely small community, and so we're right here at Seneca, Missouri, that has a population of about 2,300 people. And yet we might have that many people in a day in our casino. And they're obviously not just here from Seneca. Mm-hmm. 83 to 85% of our clientele comes from outside of Oklahoma. So we know they're coming primarily from Missouri and Arkansas. And we didn't realize how many of what housing problems there were when people became exposed. What did we do? Where did we bought some tiny houses and places to isolate them so that they could continue to work if it was a job that could be done remote, which several are. Mm-hmm. But we didn't realize one particular family has built about 5 apartments, and we didn't realize how many of our employees were living in those apartments, and 3 or 4 of our employees living in one apartment, so that it might affect one department at the casino and not realizing that this one over here in a totally different department lives in the same room, the same duplex or apartment that this one does, and so suddenly this entire department is infected. Why? And well, it's because they're living together in the same housing units. So we learned a great deal that we didn't know about. Maybe we need to be more responsible for providing housing for our employees. Maybe we thought of things that we need to be doing, Mm-hmm. And our early childhood learning center, our hours are from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, but those aren't the big hours for casinos, So how in the world do we manage childcare for an industry that is primarily a nighttime industry.
How did you manage
I
that?
don't think we did.
Oh.
That's one of the things that we realized that's a challenge that,
Mhm.
that we need to think about.
Mhm.
Right. That's what I say. It made us aware of many more things.
Mhm. Were the tiny houses a response to learning about the apartments and the number of people
Mhm.
that were together?
Right.
That's interesting. How many did you end up
We
with?
purchased 2 and we've just constructed 4 that are right over here. You know,
Mhm.
if you wanted to have Jennifer walk you over and see those, that we're just now finishing those to help with people.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Do you anticipate those will be used for other things?
Yes, we have a
moving
Haven program that violence against women and victims of crime, so forth. They will be used for that. So all of us learned different approaches during this time.
forward?
So let's hope we're wiser because of it. We also had to make places within our buildings of where could we isolate an office, you know, so that people could go there. And so we had to make some adjustments that way.
Mm-hmm. So some permanent changes really have come out of this.
Absolutely. And I'm sure they will continue. We'll have more. I don't know that we'll have 100% remote, but we'll have more hybrid. We had to make changes with learning some things and becoming more computer and webinar and Zoom literate, you know. So, yes.
Did you have to really beef up the infrastructure for technology for those things?
Fortunately, we had a fairly strong, but yes, we had to. Yes, we had to beef up. And certainly the younger generation's far more comfortable with all of that than the older generation.
Yes, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you and your time.